I'd like to take some time now to talk about something I haven't really talked about for a while. I have been writing about it often, but haven't really talked about it. And so I believe the time has come that I should talk about it. And that is the governmental restrictions and the measurements to the coronavirus, of course, all over the world, with special emphasis, of course, on the United States, because that's where we are. We published an article in our latest update by Dr. Ron Paul, who is a doctor himself, and amongst many other things, he is saying this: Dr. Fauci's advice, forecasts, and assessments prove to be wildly wrong, contradictory, and just plain bizarre. Don't wear a mask. You must wear a mask. Masks are important as symbols. Put on goggles. Stay home. Churches must be severely restricted, but Black Lives Matter marches and encounters with strangers met over the internet are perfectly fine. When Anthony Fauci demanded a lockdown of the economy for an indefinite period, he actually seemed oblivious to the havoc it would wreak on the economy and on people's lives. People like Fauci, that's what I emphasize right now. People like Fauci and others who demanded lockdowns and stay-at-home orders were still collecting their paychecks. So what did they care about anyone else? In this context, I'd like to read to you from an article which was published by Fox News yesterday. California Governor Gavin Newsom has been drawing his full monthly salary despite asking state workers in May to take a pay cut to alleviate the state's burden in fighting the coronavirus pandemic. Though elected state officials are exempt from such pay cuts, Newsom pledged that he would voluntarily slash his salary when he asked state workers to make that same sacrifice. But a Thursday report from the Sacramento Bee reveals that Newsom has continued drawing his full monthly salary. A spokesman for Newsom's office blamed the matter on an administrative error. He says the reductions for both July and August will be deduced for the next pay period. Now, Sacramento's KOVR has also reported that Plump Jack, a Northern California-based winery founded and partially owned by Newsom, was open through early July. Well, after Newsom ordered all essential business closed in March. Data released by the US Treasury Department also shows that the wine company also received a loan worth of $150,000 to $350,000 from the Paycheck Protection Program. Goes on to say, the allegation against Newsom is the latest episode in a series of missteps this summer that have cast his administration in a less than favorable light. Earlier this month, Newsom's handling of a resurgence of cases in the state was blamed on a data error that caused a backlog of nearly 300,000 virus test results. Just one example out of many I could give to show how different it is when you are in a position where you get your money from the government, and if you are in a position, as many are, specifically in California, who have lost everything. They have lost their business. They have lost their livelihood. They don't know how to survive. Many businesses are gone forever because of lockdown concepts. The question is, how important, how reasonable are those lockdown concepts? Before I go into that, I want to give you two more examples from articles which were published this morning. Because what's going to happen? I mean, we're hearing more and more about further restrictions. Germany right now, our feast site over there is in North Rhine-Westphalia. And we hear from the Prime Minister of North Rhine-Westphalia that he is really pushing for further restrictions. So again, as I said, we need to pray really hard that God would not allow Satan, because he is the one behind it all, to win. But now, here's an article by Metro News stating this. France, Monaco, and the Netherlands are among some of the new countries recently taken off the UK's air bridge list. As a result, anyone who visits any of these countries for the foreseeable future will have a quarantine for 14 days upon the return to the UK. But is there a way to avoid having a quarantine? Can you get out of quarantining if you take a coronavirus test and it comes back negative? If you have been in any of the countries not included in the UK's travel corridors, now at this point Germany, let me just say, is not one of those prohibited countries, not at this point. Let's pray it stays that way. But if you are coming back from any of those countries, it says, places you can visit without needing to quarantine on either side, that's what you can do. But if you come to another country and back from another one, you have to have self-isolation for 14 days, even if you take a test and it comes back negative. The reason for this is that it can take up to 14 days for you to develop coronavirus symptoms after you catch the virus. And in this time, you can unknowingly pass it on to others, even if you don't have any symptoms. So you will still need to quarantine, even if a test has shown you have antibodies for COVID-19. Children are not exempt from quarantine either. If you all visited a country not on the UK travel corridor list, you must all isolate for 2 weeks. So the point is, if you go to any of those countries, now it's France also, Spain, Netherlands, have to come back, have to quarantine for 14 days. At this point, at least you can go to Germany. The hope is that you are able to do that also as the feast approaches. Talking about, of course, Brian and Jill Gale. Here's another article by The Sun dated August 22. Coronavirus will be in Britain forever, and people will need regular vaccinations. A former chief scientific advisor has warned today. Professor Sir Mark Walport warned it was impossible to get the virus under control. He told BBC, this is a virus that is going to be with us forever, and almost certainly will require repeated vaccinations. What's required, he said, is a controlled global vaccination. This warning comes after the World Health Organization chief said the deadly bug could last for at least another 2 years. And then, this is for England, but I'm just talking about England right now. Authorities are working to avoid another spike, introducing local lockdowns in Manchester and, is it Leicester? Something like that, to show the spread, while people in Oldham and Blackburn will not be allowed to meet with any other households from midnight on Saturday. So, you are aware with these lockdowns, you are aware with many states here in the United States who have been imposing lockdowns, you are aware of many countries around the world that have been imposing lockdowns. People are talking about imposing them again. The Standing Watch program this week goes into that. But I want to read something from you. It's a memo I received from somebody, and let me just say this memo is absolutely, completely, totally genuine. It is not in any way a fake or fake news or a scam or a span, because I do know somebody who actually passed this on, who is very well known to me, and she received it from this author whom she knows very well. So it's not in any way to be doubted that it is genuine. Now, I've never read something like that before, so I'd like to read a few excerpts from this memo to you. That's how it goes. Many of you know that I spent roughly 35 years as a part-time professional magician. I'm sure many of you enjoy a good magic show, but you may not know the fundamental precept of performing magic. The primary function of a magician is to create an illusion of reality. In other words, what you see is not actually what is happening. You may also know that I am an 11-time Emmy recipient for sound design and audio production. Here again, my job was to create an enhanced illusion of a reality. The false reality exists in the telling of a story through voiceover, picture, sound, and music. From the early days of the pandemic, I began to see things going on that concerned me. I began to recognize some of the classic subterfuges that I have used as a magician and audio producer being applied to the pandemic. Essentially, the reality being created for the audience, the world's population, was that the virus was deadly and the worst thing to ever happen to the planet. That is the illusion that we currently live with. For most of the world, the result was lockdowns, social distancing, sheltering in place, personal identity removal through wearing of facial masks. He goes on to say, a little bit later in the memo, I could read the whole thing, but it's long, so a little bit later he's saying, for example, over the past several weeks, the government and media have been reporting an alarming increase in cases. When you hear that, what's your response? For most, the response is, that's a lot of really sick people. That's the illusion being created, and it is far from the truth. The resulting outcome is widespread fear and a perpetuation of the illusion. About 81% of positive tests are asymptomatic, and about 99.8% of people who do actually get sick experience little to no symptoms. And in terms of manipulation, there are reports that some individuals who have tested positive multiple times are not counted as one person, but are actually being counted as a separate case for each positive test. Another aspect of increasing case numbers is a simple fact that the more testing that is done, the more cases there will be. He says a little later, many who are tested may have leftover coronavirus RNA from a recent cold, for example, that might be picked up and misidentified as COVID-19. It seems to me that there may be a large number of misdiagnosed COVID-19 cases. This might account for the large number of asymptomatic cases. Instead of cases, the more important statistic is death, and of course, any death is tragic. But the question is, how are the COVID-19 deaths being counted? There have been many documented reports from doctors that have revealed specific instructions to test every patient for the virus, and if COVID-19 was even presumed to be present, even without testing, and the patient died, the cause of death was COVID-19, regardless of the real cause of death. Pre-existing conditions, which have been shown to be present in the majority of early deaths, were not taken into consideration in the counting of COVID-19 deaths. High death numbers equal increased fear and more control. He says it's already been proven that the WHO lied and manipulated many aspects of the pandemic from the very beginning. So why should anything they say be trusted? Here's his conclusion. So are you afraid to go outside without a mask? Are you afraid to stand within 6 feet of someone you don't know? Are you afraid to breathe the air around you? Are you afraid to touch something that someone else just touched? Are you doing any or all of these things because you choose to? Or are you doing them because you have been told that they are the right thing to do and you simply believed it? I feel I can safely guarantee that last December 2019, you never gave a second thought to any of this. But now you do. Why is that? In December, you were living your life. Now you are living the illusion. Unless you have done your homework and are making conscious choices, you have been manipulated into suspending your disbelief without even knowing it. And when you do that, you are giving up the right to choose. In magic, there is a technique called magician's choice. The magician is always in absolute control. of the outcome at any given time. Pick a random card? I don't think so. When you buy into the illusion of what is happening right before your eyes, you literally have no choice. The illusion is your reality. It's time to wake up. I felt this was an extraordinarily important memo. We have made our choice. We in the Church of the Eternal God have chosen to conduct services the way we have always conducted services. We are going to keep the Feast of Tabernacles in Rapid City exactly in the way we have always kept the Feast of Tabernacles. We intend to do exactly the same in Germany at the feast site there. Now, some may be afraid. I know of one example where somebody felt our approach is not the right one, and this person left and went to a church which has a more or a different approach. A church which doesn't allow singing in services, but you're supposed to hum silently. You have to wear masks in services. The minister is not to speak loudly because droplets might fly through the air. There has to be a shorter service because you don't want to stay in the room overly long. And when you leave the room and are outside, no hugging, social distancing, talk a little, go home. One of our ministers, when he read that, said to me, "Why would I even go to church under those circumstances?" Well, we are not going to conduct services that way. And we have been tremendously blessed that we were led to a feast site in South Dakota where you do not have these kind of mandated social distancing, these kind of mandated wearing of masks, these kind of mandated caps when it comes to attendance, and so on. You know, you have to make a choice, but make sure you're making the right choice, and making the right choice for the right reasons. I know there are ministers in that particular church I'm thinking of, but they are not the only ones, who don't want to go along with these kind of restrictions, and they are no longer in the church. They are no longer in the church. Because this is how it's supposed to be done. And if you don't do it, you are sowing discord. For a long time, these churches have prohibited any assemblies whatsoever in person. None, worldwide. This is not something which we have chosen to do. And there's a booklet out there, you might have read it, and if not, please do. It's called Obeying God Rather Than Man. And you have to make a choice. Is it still obeying God if you conduct services which are clearly opposite to what the Bible tells you? Think about it. Don't become somebody who is living in an illusion.